Welcome to another episode of Angels, Positivity and Love. Incredible guests the world over coming on to share their insights, their experiences, what they do for others. Oftentimes they're in service to others. We've had healers, New York Times best-selling authors, the youngest Delta Force operator ever at age 23, a White House physician to the US president, and so on and so forth. They all have, again, unique life paths, just like all of you do in the audience. This show, oftentimes we have the guests at the end of the show take steps, whether it's just catching a little bit of lit stage from Texas and the good old of USA, all the way to New Zealand, Australia, Germany, France, you name it. We've got about 20 countries so far that the guests have come from. And those guests will smell sage or even take steps with angels. So we'll see what happens at the end of this show. I've got an incredible guest. His name is Rod Bland out of Sydney, Australia. He's got moxie to him. He's got a marketing, sales, business strategy, IT background, but he does more than that. He's almost the consummate philosopher, but quiet is how I'm going to describe him. He's the show host of Untethered Consciousness. You can tell something's going on. He's definitely on his path. He's checking things out. He's had an out-of-body experience. We'll see if he can share that with us. He's interviewed a lot of different folks for his show. You need to check that out. Again, it's on Spotify in the usual spots. Untethered Consciousness, Rod Bland. Rod, you were kind enough to have me on. I think I was episode 47 in June. Thank you so much for that. But thank you for coming on my show. And I'm a big fan of yours. What's your secret to being so likable?
What's my secret to being so likable? You know what? I noticed this in my teenage son, actually. He's an observer. He likes to sit back and, watch what's going on. And I feel like that's something, that's just what I do. I just sit and watch and observe people and allow people to talk. And I think maybe that's the reason why. I don't know. It's what I notice is that when oftentimes we don't let people talk, we interrupt them. It's not a great experience. So when somebody actually has the opportunity to speak without being interrupted, that's maybe it's not a common thing in this world. So perhaps that's part of it. I don't know.
You definitely hold the space for folks. I still remember our interview, so thank you for that. Okay, you got to share with us. We'll get back to how you got started in sales and business and stuff like that in a little bit. But how did you get interested in humanity? The whole path that mankind is on and what we're all kind of seeking. When did that start?
I think growing up on the farm, so I grew up on a farm in the bush in Western Australia, right? It's miles and miles from our nearest neighbour. Lots of wide open space, very hot summers, very cold winters. And I love growing up there, but ever since I was ever since I could begin to read, I wanted to know about things that nobody else talked about. So I can remember when, I think it was for my 8th birthday, my mum and dad bought me a book called Explaining the Unexplained. It was literally this thick. All right. So I have to see if I can find it on Amazon, but it's like blue cover, Explaining the Unexplained. So that was kind of the beginning of my wanting to learn about. It wasn't particularly about esoteric things, but it was just about anything unusual. So I love science fiction, read every single horror book I could find, anything that was, anything out of the ordinary. So it's always been there. And then sort of fast forward 30 years, 40 years, and it was when I ran into people recounting near-death experiences. That's when the lights went on. So that's when I thought, wow, there's something going on. There's something more happening after we die, after we leave this planet Earth. And the more of those accounts that I watched, the more I was convinced, it's not just people hallucinating, it's something more. So that's where my, curiosity about that really sort of took off, and that led to starting my channel. And yeah.
And you had an out-of-body experience. Do you want to share that? Go ahead and get into that.
Sure. Yeah. I can't remember why. I think it was just part of, I'm a voracious reader. So I think once I'd read Robert Monroe's series of books. So Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, Ultimate Journey. I think once I read those, then I started thinking, well, you know, that'd be really cool, wouldn't it, to be able to have an out-of-body experience? And it wasn't clear about how to make that happen, you know, and it seemed like it was fairly spontaneous for a lot of people. So Robert Monroe is a good example. Like, he couldn't even stop having it. The reason it began, despite his best efforts to not have an out-of-body experience, it was happening. It was almost like forced upon him. And you know, I can remember having what I thought were dreams of flying, but what really felt real, like flying around my farm, you know, when I was small, and waking up from those, not believing that I'd actually just been asleep, like it seemed so real. Anyway, there's another practitioner, is Russian, Michael Raduga. For anyone I often get people ask me, oh, how do I have an out-of-body experience? I'd say, look up Michael Raduga, and he has some really simple techniques. And because a lot of people really complicate it, like you've got to meditate for 2 hours, but his method is really short and effective for a lot of people. So anyway, I followed his advice, and over the sort of a 2-week period. So the basic advice would be, you got to catch your body is in a ideal state for the out-of-body state when you just wake up, or when you're just about to go to sleep. So it's I think it's called the hypnagogic state. So if you can have an intention when just as you wake up from REM sleep to actually exit your body, then you have a much greater chance of being successful at that. So anyway, I tried this. So his advice was to imagine that you're standing in front of the bathroom mirror. So I was in a house in Sydney where I was in an upstairs bedroom, and there's a bathroom downstairs. So that's what I did. As crazy as it sounds, I thought, okay. Each time I woke up, I thought, oh, stand in front of the bathroom mirror, and then did that for a couple of weeks. And then one night, I can remember looking at the clock later, it was like 2:22 on the clock. Anyway, I woke up and I caught the thought, stand in front of the bathroom mirror, and I kid you not, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror. And my first reaction was complete shock. I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I actually managed to do this, right? And I knew that my body was laying on the bed upstairs, and here I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, but everything was very murky. And he'd warned us about this. He said, you've got to somehow solidify the state, your state of consciousness. It was very grey. I couldn't really see myself in the mirror. It was kind of almost like an apparition was all I could see in the mirror, but it was very dark and things were muddy. So his advice was you use your senses to try to solidify. So feel around the edge of the mirror, the basin. I actually had this. My first instinct was to put my teeth on the edge of the basin, right? That was the first thing I thought of doing, and then everything solidified, and it was pretty much a carbon copy of bathroom in the real world, except for where there's a basin and there's a toilet next to it, and but instead of the toilet there was a shower. That was that's interesting. There's not normal. It was a shower there. Why is that? Anyway, I had an intention to go outside and fly. That was really my only intention. So walked out of the bathroom, grabbed the front door. I could feel the door, opened the handle, went outside, and it was broad daylight. So it's the middle of the night, but it's broad daylight outside. And the gate was there, the fence was there, and I just thought one word, fly. That was it. And I just took off, meandered off into the air, and I was kind of drifting down the street. But the street was different. It was like my street, but it wasn't designed for cars. There was no cars anywhere. There was a lot of people that were going upwards and downwards. So there was like people. It was like a Grand Central Station in suburban Sydney, and they were all smiling. They were just, I don't know where they were going, but they were all up to something. And some people noticed that I was there. They were smiling at me. I didn't really have, I couldn't see any part of my body. I was more like a point of consciousness. I didn't have any other sort of I know a lot of people say, you know, they can see their astral body. I couldn't see any of that. I was just something that was moving. And you know, I could see people looking outside of their, you know, standing out in their balconies, and I had this urge to say, first time flyer coming through, you know. And they thought that was pretty amusing, but nobody actually talked to me. So I sort of drifted down the street. And then for some reason, I wanted to turn around and sort of come back. And then in the process, so I should point out, so it was bright. Everything was so, it was like my senses had all been amped up 500%. So the colors, the light, the sound, everything was way clearer than in the real world. And it's difficult to explain, but it wasn't really, it felt like I was only there for a short period of time, but I couldn't say how long. So as I turned around and came back, then I just got dumped back in my body. And I was so excited. I can remember once when I was back in and thinking, oh my God, I can't wait to tell my wife. So, but I had to wait like 5 hours. So I went back to sleep, and then when I knew my wife was awake, I thought, I said, oh, you would not believe what just happened. So yeah, she's good with all of the things that I talk about that are esoteric, and she thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. Anyway, that's my story.
Wow. I mean, that's a good story. Hey, tell us a little more about that. Like, since then, have you done it again, or how often do you think about it? Was it all the time back in the old days, and now it's only once a month? Where are you for reacting to it?
It was just a one-off for me so far. Now, I have had some lucid dreams, which is a different thing. But as far as, you know, getting to an out-of-body state from being actually awake, that's the one and only time that I've been able to do it. I have wanted to do it, but I'd have to say that my focus and dedication to having to achieve that the first time round is probably what was needed. And then after that, it was like, oh, I've done that now. It'd be really cool to do it again, but I haven't been willing to really put in the concerted effort and the, you know, you've got to think about when you're going to sleep. So you're kind of programming your subconscious mind so that it's the first thing I think about when I wake up. I haven't applied that sort of dedication to it. I know that's probably what I need to do. But on the lucid dream side of things, so that is it's another way to, and I would argue it's an easier way to achieve a fully conscious state while you're asleep, or while your body's asleep. And so that's really just realizing that you're dreaming. So I've had that occur a few times, and basically it's there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. I know what I can go to sleep going, okay, I want to have a lucid dream. So really all that is just realizing that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. So if you're having a dream and you go, oh, I'm in a dream, this is actually a dream here, then you can kind of dispel this dream state to being more consciously awake and aware, and you have control over what goes on. So how that looks to me is that I would like either look at my fingers and really focus on my fingers. So first step one is realizing that you're dreaming. So I haven't been able to control that. Sometimes it just happens and I go, oh, I'm actually dreaming. Look at your fingers, or look at the ground and like really make things solid, like find the detail, and you can really get to the fine grains of sand. So you get to that point and then everything kind of becomes clearer, because a dream state is usually foggy, you know, but that just makes everything clearer. And a couple of times the environment just completely disappeared and changed. And it was just some other construct. I don't know where I was. I just knew that I could move around at will and I could control where I wanted to go. But I haven't actually translated that to like, okay, being out of my body somewhere around my, you know, in this sort of near the physical world. But yeah, that's really cool as well. That's a really interesting experience.
Okay, which one of those two modalities do you equate to being closest to, or are they different from remote viewing?
Yeah, I don't know much about remote viewing other than what I've read, and I'd say probably it's closer to, it's more like a division of your consciousness or an extension of your consciousness. Whereas those two experiences I've had, it's like I'm fully in one place or fully in another. I think of remote viewing as like you can take a part, so you sort of remain conscious here, but you can take a part of that and extend it somewhere as well, which I think is what we do, here on our physical existence. That's what I believe anyway, is that we're extending a part of our spirit, if you like, into a human body, but most of us still remains in another place.
We're going to talk about that more in just a little bit. You gave me a great idea. I love it. Thank you. I'm going to mention the Sean Ryan show. Is it McGonigal? The guy, Adam Monroe Institute. He did a long interview, 6 hours long. He puts a lot of language in there and describes that stuff very detailed. He might be arguably one of the top remote viewers around. I can't remember which way it leans, out of body or other. And then there's Paul Sugar, who was a remote viewer with the Stargate program. I've had him on as a show guest on this series at least 3 times, plus he's a panel member, I think 3 or 4 times. I can't get him on enough. Love the guy. Very gentle. He's 72, 73. Great individual. Lots of fun. So people can check that out if they're interested. Plus, I'll mention Marilyn Hughes. May 18th of 2025 will be her show, although she's already aired it on Spotify way early. So if you're seeing this, you can just go check it out on Spotify. Good for her. But I included an 8-minute clip after we finished taping. We were playing around. She's on a Hawaiian beach with her eyes shut. I'm just using my voice talking to her, and I do a little channeling. I set the table. You get to have the experience. But our interference was absolutely crazy because we're talking with all these folks, including you, Rod. You need a compliment here. Your ability to focus, I don't know if you've heard how good it is, but it's good. And when she was focusing, we have a split screen here. People can see what it looks like normally. Here's what happens when she was focusing. It started to go all scrambled and flipping. So people can watch that progression as she's hanging on Hawaiian beach with angels, Thich Nhat Hanh, and at the very end, she gets to see light in her hand and a figure. And it was a white-winged horse flying around. People can get anything. Birds, hummingbird, light, flower, moving around, made out of light. It's a long story. Check that out. So I had to do a lot of digressing. I bought you lots of time. What would you want to share with us first before we talk about the universe, how big it is, the soul, our unique life path, all the eternal questions of man? Good luck with this. What would you want to share? You came on probably with a couple topics. Do you have one you want to just go with right now? You're incredible when you talk.
I would say, yeah, I mean, this just applies to life in general, but I'm definitely the opposite of a realist, right? I mean, the typical realist perspective is that what we see, what we feel, what we hear, what our senses, the information that is provided to us through our human senses is all there is, right? What we can measure with instruments, that's all there is. And therefore, anything that can't be explained in those terms isn't real, isn't a fact. And I would say that if you are in that camp, then just consider that there might be something outside of that. And I tend not to argue with people about realism. I just, about being a realist, I just provide my perspective and let people have their own perspective. But the thing that's lacking for me in the realist perspective is that there is something at the beginning underpinning everything, but they can't say what that, nobody can say what that is. Okay, there's the physical universe, but where did that come from? But that's like one of those unanswered questions that no one talks about in the realist world. So I think that alone should demand a question and a discussion, right? And some sort of debate about, okay, well, what actually happened there? And I think we're sort of heading that way with, revelations with quantum mechanics and starting to reassess, what do we think we actually know about the universe? But I think it's just really being willing to actually ask a question rather than say, okay, well, this is what I learned, in my education, and this is what my parents told me, and that's all there is. So I think it's really good to just stay curious, keep asking questions, and see what comes up.
And what do you call yourself? Are you an explorer on behalf of mankind, a philosopher? a seeker? How do you term it, no matter how modest it is, if you had to slap a label on your passions here? Because you seem very passionate about this. What do you call yourself?
I would just say just eternally curious, right? How do things work? And then I guess that's just human nature. Our human nature is that we want to organize things and put labels on things so that we understand them, so that we can kind of bring them into our worldview. But then as I've gotten a little bit older, there's space there for, there's just things that we can't explain that way. And isn't that incredible? Isn't that amazing that there's so much that we, as I've gotten older, I think there's more that we don't know than could ever be what we do know. And that's a pretty amazing thing, I think. And it just, you can live a lifetime of curiosity and always be amazed at what you find.
I like it. Okay, Untethered Consciousness, your show. You're the show host. When did the idea tumble in? How did it tumble in? Tell us how you got started.
So that started with the near-death experiences. So I can't say how I ran across the first one, but the first time I saw an account of a near-death experience, it really piqued my curiosity. And then, because it provided what I thought was really concrete answers as to what was going on, when people die. And there's loads of material. This is the thing. There is so much material. There's so many accounts. There are some authors who have been interviewing people for 20 odd years. Doctors who have been working in hospitals that started to notice these patterns with people who were willing to share what actually occurred to them. They were going, oh, and there were people who didn't know each other, right? So they couldn't have collaborated, and yet there was these similarities in what they experienced when their heart had been turned off for a couple of minutes, or they'd had, for some reason they were clinically dead. And I thought, well, it's just something I want to explore further. And I think that it's something that it's worthwhile people knowing. And I think that people want that information. They've got to get it from somewhere. And there are plenty of channels around now that actually do that. And but that it didn't matter to me, actually, Michael. It was just as soon as I saw it, I thought, that's something you have to do. That's something you have to talk to people about. And it wasn't a case of, well, I think that's a pretty good niche to be in, how many people, what competitors are there, etc. None of that mattered. It was just, I knew that was something that I had to do. And that's how I still feel about it now. So, I don't feel a great urgency to be interviewing one person a day, but I feel like it's really important information that people should know. So, that's where I started interviewing people about near-death experiences. And I just reached out to a couple of people, and they very kindly said, yes, I'll do it, when I had a channel with 0 people. And then that's then introduced me to channeling and people who have had ET encounters, and so it's brought, the scope has broadened a little bit. But it's still the essential theme is things that just can't be explained by modern science.
It's a good show. And now let's talk about your guests, but without talking about your guests, the classic Zen thing. Which guest has left you most curious all these months, weeks, years later, whichever way it needs to be sliced? Which guest has left you scratching your head later?
Did you say like guests but don't name guests?
Yeah, so describe them abstractly, unless you've got full permission to blab about them.
Oh, she won't mind me talking about this, I'm sure. So I've had so many fascinating guests. It's hard. But the one that really stands out to me was recently Rachel Corpus. Rachel believes that she's an angel incarnate, that she actually is an actual angel who came to earth. I fully believe it, of course. I believe everyone at face value. But after speaking with her, and I can't see how you can't not. I mean, you'd be a believer for sure, Michael, and I am too. But it was just astounding to me that there's, you know, the thing about angels is they don't need to come to planet Earth because they got plenty going on already. They've got plenty of work to do, but she has, and she's just incredible. And you can just, she doesn't even need to talk. It's like some of those angel photos that you showed me before, Michael. You can just see there's something about them that becomes immediately apparent that they're not just the average person. They're not just the average human being. Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
that's the one that stands out to me.
and who else? Is there another type of, was it a remote viewing person? Was it a this person, a that person? What also struck you as super interesting that even to this day, again, you still ponder on the dog walk or on your, during your exercise at some point?
Yeah, I think the other one would be Jerry Sargent. So Jerry Sargent he's been around for quite a long time. He started an organization called Star Magic Healing. So without wanting to promote him, but his story in itself is fascinating because by and I won't give away a story because I think it's really interesting to watch it. I think he was episode 46 on my channel. He, by all accounts, should have been dead or locked up in jail for life. Really, he should have been. And what occurred in his life to go from being a really hardened criminal to what he's doing now, healing people with love, essentially, is a pretty incredible transformation. And when you look at him, he looks like a hardened criminal. But then when you hear him talk, it's quite the opposite. So he's a fascinating human that seems to have a lot of opposites, and he's also really open about talking about what he's been through, what he's done, and he's very unapologetic about. Where I like people who don't apologize for who they are and how they are, and especially if they're in the game of life to help us humans get better or to help us humans heal. I've got a lot of time for people like that. So yeah, here's another one that stands out. But like I say, I've interviewed probably 1/10 of what you have, Michael, but I think I'm up to 52, but there's so many that stand out. And it's such a privilege. I often get to, maybe not so much at the end of an interview, because sometimes you're focusing a lot on, there's some technical things you've got to focus on right during the interview. And then when I go back and do the edits again, I go, wow, how lucky am I that I get to do this? That I get to talk to people about these things, and they just come on willingly. You know, they're professionals, a lot of them. They come on and share that time with me. Sometimes it might be a couple of hours, and there's no, there's no other exchange other than they want to come and have a chat to me, and I just want to have a chat to them, but it's just eye-opening experience, information, and just getting to know some really quality human beings, which I enjoy.
You're 52, count more like 500. Hey, let me see your hands for a second, like a palm reader. Just put your hands up for us. And then drop the left hand, if you will.
My left hand?
Yeah, just drop that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you're game, just see if you can feel this is only the highest intent, not my bill paying side, not my worrying, thinking side that in 3 hours I'll be right back to like a regular dude. But if you're game, only your higher self, not your worrying about audience or anything else. Only love and above, big heart, Rod Bland in Sydney. You can feel my vibe in Texas. Tell me if you feel a little warmth or sparkle. And I'm going to ask you the next question while you're breathing through your mouth and just letting go like you would to go out of body or anything else to have a good time. Nodding, are you getting a little bit of vibe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how many of these guests have told you that you're on a healing path yourself? Like you might become a healer one day or do something for someone else, when you're a lot older, of course.
Yeah, a couple have.
Yeah, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
What could you share out loud for us about what have they said that you could share out loud? A lot of that's private. The brain doesn't want to process it. It could be another decade. But what wouldn't you mind sharing out loud?
Well,
and here we can drop hands now.
Yeah. So the answer to that question has come because when I've a couple of channels, I've had a few channels on recently, and channel psychics. And I asked them about what I'm doing with my channel. So I used to not ask questions that related to me personally because I felt like that was being a bit selfish. But then somebody said, well, any question that you ask is actually a question that everyone else wants to have answered too. So just ask away. So that's why I do that. And I look at, and I still do a lot. I look at what I'm, it's like a part-time gig. I have a full-time job. I work for someone else. And then what I do here is like a passion project. It's a part-time thing. But there's a couple have said that over time, it'll evolve. It'll become something that's completely different to what it is now. And it's not anything you might have been thinking that you would even actually do, but it'll have a big impact. So I'm intrigued and excited, but I'm not in any, I'm also, I don't have a sense of urgency or great rush, which you would think would be the opposite as you get older, but I'm just allowing things to unfold as they are. And I try to say yes as much as possible, just to say yes to people as much as I can.
That's an incredible life philosophy right there. I mean, if we could all aspire to just in 20 years of trying, learning, seeking, if we could say yes to life and be that allowing in terms of letting everything unfold, wow. Let's check that box for you. I can feel it. It's beautiful. I'm giving you a big compliment here on air on Angels, Positivity, and Love. So remember, folks, subscribe, like, share, comment. We're hitting, by the time you see this, we've hit a 500,000 channel visits. We still need your help, though, with comments. Emojis count. We have the shyest crowd coming on. Who wants to actually, well, people do actually smell sage, feel the vibe. People could put their hand up, play this back. You could be in Germany and it's 2030. You got to do a little letting go loosey-goosey, do this. Rod hasn't done this in 30 years since he was 7. So
no, I have.
It breaks all structure. Yeah, it's just a secret little way to break all structure. It's good a few times, and then the psyche will get around it, and it won't work as well. You got to come up with something new like that. Hey, I'm going to put up an angel, though, to get a compliment for you and a little insight about healing. You could just say "got it" out loud. You don't have to share anything. Then we're going to get back to a normal interview. This is a photo, interdimensional if you want, for New Zealanders and Europeans. She's flashed pulse, just done a little movement. We know a historical photo of like Audrey Hepburn. If you want her later, we can do it at the very end. But we know a historical photo. There's no way they wink, smile, the eyebrow goes up, or anything else. But here's Audrey. If you give yourself permission to let the universe do their job, especially Audrey, you can catch an uninvented perfume in the air, flowers. I'll try to hold it steady. Or something else. I'm pulling back. You may or may not have gotten something, but here's Charlotte. Get a private insight about your healing path. If you prefer to close your eyes and get it visual, it's okay. And my unofficial rule for folks, because they're going to ask their own questions, is just to breathe a little more through the mouth. If the shoulders are heaving ho like you're in a really mean yoga class and I'm the mean instructor yelling, breathe, breathe, that's a great way to just turn that stereo volume up so your whole body's involved. Your body knows more than the brain. You can even hear a modality or two. Those you got to keep to yourself till it happens. Are you getting something, Rod, from Charlotte?
Yeah.
Good. Now we're getting back to the interview. Where do you want to take us next? Where it all started, salesman, door to door, 18, 19, 20 years old, the rejection. You learn to check another box. We all wish we could have the rejection experience, the allowing experience, letting it unfold, and more like you just described. The ability to listen, to the ability to be a healing presence like you are as a show host. We're throwing more compliments. This is more like a celebratory victory lap for you here today, the show. But tell us about the hard stuff. What was it like to get rejected door to door, nonstop?
How did you know that I did door to door?
Oh,
I haven't thought about that for a long time. I used to live in Perth, which is on the other side of the country from Sydney, for those who know Australia. And I, when I was a kid, when people ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be a pilot in the Air Force. And that's all that was my answer. I thought that was a good one. And, looking back, I'm not so sure that I was that passionate about the idea, but I thought that people thought that was a really good idea. So that was my standard answer. And so everything I did, all my schooling was in search of that. Well, it was to serve that goal, right? And So at 17, so I was ducks in my school. I ran the award, won the award for 4 out of 6 subjects in year 12. And so I did really well in school. And then I went to the offices of the Air Force. You have to sit some sort of preparatory exams, psychological testing. And I failed that testing. I'm not exactly sure why, but anyway, they said, "Oh, come back, come back in a couple of years." And one person suggested, "Oh, if you did an engineering degree, then that could be an entry path for you, into being a pilot in the Air Force." So I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll do that then." And so left home at 17, moved up to Perth because we were down in the bush, and went to university. And within 6 weeks, I realized I hated it. I went from being the smartest kid on the block to what felt to me like I was the dumbest kid on the block. And I'd never had that experience before. And it was really a very sharp entry into the real world. And I probably lasted about 8 weeks. I thought I just couldn't keep doing something that I just disliked. And so I kind of was in limbo for a few months. I got a part-time job at the local shopping centre pushing around trolleys. And then I thought, because I had an interest in food and nutrition, and then I enrolled in a nutrition and food science degree. And I lasted about 2 years there. So I guess the point of the story is I went from having a very, very firm and solid plan to having really no plan at all. And I basically dumped everything that I thought that I was going to do and didn't know what I was going to do next. And one of the jobs, but one thing is I never took Social Security. So in here we call it like going on the dole. I never wanted to do that. I never did. I always managed to find some sort of work to do. And I was willing to do anything. One of the things that I did was literally selling frying pans door to door. And I can remember going, sort of ad in the paper for, enthusiastic salespeople wanted great commissions, etc. And this is the first time that I saw somebody that employed like motivational techniques to really get people excited, and which it was like the leader of the company. So basically, they imported all these really cheap products in from the UK, and then they had these teams of people that literally walked around the streets of Perth with these bags over their shoulders, with all calculators and frying pans and pens and stuff like that, walking into people's businesses, going, "We've got some stuff to flog you," basically. And the number of times that you get the door slammed on you, or "Get out, don't come in here, we're not interested." But occasionally people would say, "Okay, what have you got? What have you got?" So that taught me a lot about rejection, and that you actually don't die when you get rejected. But it also taught me about, I guess I'm so grateful for the work that I do now, because it's nothing compared to doing that. Like that is pretty hard, Yako, especially when it's really hot in the middle of summer. It's a hard way to make a living. So yeah, that's my door-to-door selling story.
What's the opposite word to rejection?
Well, it's acceptance, right?
Or no. But from your experience, now looking back, what's another way to flip that pancake, the other side of the pancake? What did you learn from it? What's the word opposite of rejection that you could tell that story? Did it build up your resilience? What are some other words you might use instead of rejection?
I think you don't, just because somebody says no to you doesn't mean it's nothing about you, right? I guess that's the important thing, is whatever people say is really rarely about you. It's more about what's going on with them, in their head, in their minds. So you just can't take things personally. And maybe it's my sort of fairly laid back personality, but yeah, I really try not to take things personally. Probably the one person who I take things personally from is my wife. So I think that the more, the more, you know, the more that I respect someone and value someone, probably if they have some sort of feedback for me, I might take it more personally. But I think that's the key thing, is whatever's going on, whatever people say, you know, and if they've got a different opinion to you, then you really can't take it personally. And it's, you just have to invite dialogue. I think if the world over, if we just invited and allowed for debate and dialogue without it becoming personal, you know, it'd be a pretty amazing place.
Archangel Michael just told me like 3 weeks ago, a no, a rejection is not something to take personally. It's not a reflection on me. And I love that you are sharing that with us from an early age of 19 or 20. Incredible lesson. I got another quote from an Archangel by coincidence who said this around 2014, tying in with what you just said again and what you said towards the beginning of the show. Archangel Uriel said, if more people would listen, less conflict would arise in any given situation. I like that. Can you talk to us about the world currently? It doesn't matter, pick a country, it really doesn't matter. Canada, UK, Europe, it doesn't, and you know, Australia is going through its ebbs and flows. Welcome to being human. It doesn't matter what the specifics are, whether we're talking politics, censorship, freedom, whatever. The right to do this, the right to do that. What's your view of humanity right now? This is another one of those eternal questions, but if anybody can do it, it's you, Rod. What do you see going on behind the scenes? What's really happening right now?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask that question, because I've become quite fascinated with American politics, and I don't profess to know very much about it. But the reason why I became interested was when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. started. I think maybe he showed up on the Joe Rogan podcast or somewhere, and I thought, wow, you know, I didn't know much about the Kennedys or their history, and then, you know, some of the speeches that his uncle and his dad, you know, JFK and RFK Sr. gave were just astounding. I didn't realize that there was politicians who really felt that liberty and freedom and all the things that the, you know, American Constitution is about, that they really embodied, and that was their kind of primary driving force in how they made decisions. And I think that it's what people are starting to realize is that there are lots of really large organizations, so not just government, but large corporations and others. And it's not just conspiracy theories. They're actually actively working to subjugate and control and drive sentiment and provide information, so that people, we're kind of like, we just do as we're told as subjects, and we give up our freedoms. You know, I'm not saying this is necessarily it's what's behind every corporation, but up until the pandemic, I think we didn't think that was really possible. At least I didn't think that was. I assumed that everyone's good, right? And I still do that. I mean, humans, as a general rule, I think that everybody has a goodness in them and are generally well-intentioned. But I think what happened after the pandemic, people started to realize that actually sometimes they're not, and sometimes we've been given information and fed this information to serve a power structure that does not want to be removed from where it is. And you know, I think that's still going on today. But for me personally, I'm now much more skeptical about information wherever you see it. And I think, you know, with AI, it's a lot easier now to actually produce what looks to be authentic information that's delivered by someone, and it may not actually be the truth. So I think it's really important that we have a kind of a skeptical stance about information on anything, you know, whether it becomes to food or whether it whether it comes to you know, what politicians tell us, what our government tells us. And I know we don't have ultimate power over all those things, but what we do have power over is maintaining this sort of intellectually skeptical stance about things, and then like seeking clarity, seeking information, rather than just taking things at face value. If somebody says to you, well, let's take the food pyramid, for example. Like, you know, I don't know if it's still in Australia. Government organizations still have, you know, at the top of the food pyramid is lots of refined carbohydrates, and you sort of work your way down to the at the bottom of the pyramid are the most nutrient dense foods, and at the top are not. And then it's just amazing to me to think, well, there's so much research now that says that quite the opposite is true. It's like, you know, lower carbohydrates and less processed food is better for you, and as provides better outcomes. But it's just an example of how, you know, there's this sort of incumbent information that's been delivered for a very long time that serves an agenda of some very, very large and powerful organizations, and we just can't forget that. We just got to open our eyes to that's what's actually going on, and then push back in whatever way that we can, but just be skeptical. Like, find your own information, do your own research, and perhaps instead of getting all your information from mainstream media, maybe add in some independent news sources there, and you might learn some things that you just cannot believe. And you thought, well, how could those, you know, I've trusted those organizations for, my mum and dad used to watch CNN, MSNBC without picking on anybody, but I think we should pick on them. And I think that it's just, we've just got to wake up. And I think humanity is waking up, but I think it's got a long way to go. Yeah, that's my rant about that.
I used to be on Wall Street for 2 years in New York City, then switched to public relations. When I was 24, I looked like I was 14. I'm 56 now. But for 18 years, I did public relations. And I can honestly say I don't recognize, you know, if it's the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Fortune, Forbes, Business Week doesn't exist anymore. I was a business press guy. Those days are gone. I don't recognize the outlets. There are lots of, Barry Weiss created the free press. There's lots of new places to go. But this is something eternal for man. It's been going back beyond the Roman Empire. Political families in the 60s would run a candidate, and this is the last I say about it, would run against a candidate, and then find an extra candidate to come in with the same last name and first name of the candidate they were up against to dilute that person's vote. So it'd be a three-way race with two John Smiths. And so you would do better that way. That is something that happened. It's not just today. It's a little bit like Casablanca, the casino scene, when the head of police, chief of police, the gendarmerie, steps into the casino and says, I'm shocked to see there's gambling going on here. And the waiter walks up in the envelope and says, sir, your winnings. And he just tucks it in and yells, arrest all the usual suspects. So welcome to mankind. Welcome to everything else. What have you noticed from your show guests? What have you noticed on your own personal journey that's different from when you started the show? Are you feeling more, sensing more, having just that little, is there a little voice coming in? Is there a little more love, a little more, does your iced tea, does your lemonade, does your orange juice taste like two orange juices? What's happening with you?
I think that you know how when you're on a path, it's not the correct path. It's there's something about it that is irritating. That's the best way I can put it. And, you know, you've just got to notice when that irritation occurs, because it's not necessarily, for some people, it's like, it's in a, they just can't go another day, right? They're getting paid $250,000 doing something that they absolutely hate. They've got no other options. And sometimes they just go, okay, that's it, cold turkey, I'm done. But what I've noticed is that I don't have, so the first thing is that irritation is no longer there. Like I can just tell within myself that this is the right path to be on. And there's nothing, you know, mind blowing about that, but it does feel great to be on that path. what I've noticed about people, the first thing that came to my head when you asked that question was that there are so many people who have had unusual esoteric experiences. They've seen things they can't explain. They've had a near-death experience, but they haven't been willing to talk about it because they were worried that people would think they were crazy. And, with good reason, because especially, even if we go back 30 years ago, some of the experiences that people had, if they talked about it, they would have been medicated and put in a mental asylum for sure. So I think that the fact that people now are opening up and talking about these things, and the more that people do it, the more that other people will do it, the more that this information will become more mainstream. And, and those who have not had these experiences will then begin to accept, well, they're not crazy. This actually does really occur. So I find that encouraging, that there's an acceptance of those things that can't be explained by science, and without it being, well, you're just a nutter, or no, you can't even talk about that, and no, you're going to be, the family is going to absolutely, if you dare talk about that, you're going to be, I'll never talk to you again, or you're dead to me. That doesn't happen. That, I think that used to happen, but now it's different, and I find that encouraging. I think that's a sign that we're becoming more open-minded. We're becoming more accepting. We're becoming more of, well, I have it's not just, well, these are my ideas, this is my ideology, and that's the only one that's true. Now it's, well, these are my ideas and those are yours, and I don't agree with those, but I'm cool with debating them. And I think you're okay still anyway. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I think that's good. I find that encouraging. That's what I've been learning from talking to people.
I love it. Hey, we have not blown sage on the show. I light a little sage. You haven't smelled any in Sydney on air. We might have done this before the show. So just so I don't forget, I get all excited with guests. I've forgotten a couple times out of, got 164 shows taped, or 170, with 247 booked into July of 2025 to plug the show. By the time people see this, hopefully we've got 2025 booked out. Good to have a backlog in the future. We're a super small show. Rod, your show's bigger than ours. It's got to be. Okay, you can see the flame.
Can't be.
Only rule is just give yourself a break. Breathe. Less doing, less trying. Be here. Shakespeare. To be, not to be, stick to the to be. But literally, if you want to set your intent, ask the universe angels to get you out of your head into your heart, and do the Zen thing, smelling without smelling, or use the schnoggin without using it. Let your heart do the smelling. Sage from Texas, good old US of A, to Sydney, Australia. Let me know when you start catching stuff. If anybody wants to breathe through their mouth, it's like turning up the volume. But why settle for linear? Not that sage isn't great. This is all energy and love. Ask for flowers, ask for wave action, whether you hear it or feel it, or my microphone's up top. Catch a little Hawaii on your nose. What are you getting, Rod, in Australia?
I always get this, when you do that, I get this kind of like tingly, buzzy thing.
Fuzzy works. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm snubbing this out before I set off the fire alarms and then have to edit this video. What's a final area? We're going to do a couple angels. We'll wrap it up shortly. What's a final area you want to remind people on that's really important? Not to discount, making sure I didn't just put an ember on my pillow. I'm sitting on a pillow. I'm admitting it. What's a final reminder for us to just how to keep it real, how to slow down, have more fun? What is your tip for us all?
The first thing that comes to mind is, I think a lot of us, we live our lives because we're afraid of dying, right? We're afraid of that death is the absolute end. And I think from watching so many near-death experiences, and then there's a number of people that have been through like past life regressions, and now people can be regressed to between their lives. I think there's enough information for me now that I'm convinced that it's not the end. And you might think, well, if death is not the end, then that means I can kind of just cruise along, right? Well, I don't think that either. I don't think that realization actually does it. If anything, it's like, well, I just really want to make the most of this life while I'm here, but we don't need to live in fear of the end, of there being an end. We don't need to live. I think that state of being afraid of dying, especially as you get older, like, oh God, I'm like being afraid of that is, I think it just diminishes your life experience. So my hope for people is that they can, I guess, avail themselves of enough information, or perhaps they'll even have some sort of an experience that convinces them that the end of life, when this human body dies, is not the end of you. That's really my one hope for people. And I think that when you get to that realization, when you have that sort of understanding, like, yes, I believe that that's actually true, and I've got no doubt about it, then your life changes from that point onwards. You can't live the same way, but you still see it a lot. You know, people desperately trying to find ways to hang on, to live for longer. There's nothing wrong with any of those things, but the reason that there is there for some people is because they're really afraid that that's the end. And I think if you can get to the point where you understand it's not, I think that's a great thing.
Opening openness. You're encouraging people to do the classic Tibetan Buddhist thing, whether you knew it or not. Hey, I'm going to put up an angel. I think you already had her up before. Charlotte, get a private answer on this. Hear at least about one of your past lives, or hear how many there roughly were, and still get a juicy one. She loves kicking out this stuff. You don't have to share it out loud. Breathe through your mouth, let go. You're listening with your heart. And all of you at home, if you want to put your hand out and feel her vibe, it doesn't matter if it's 2030. Again, if you're in New Zealand, you can do this. No triota. Always try Archangel Gabriel. It's not about the words. It's about being in the heart. Did you get your answer on something on that front? You don't have to share any details. Just say, yep.
No, sorry. I'm in a trance again.
Oh, I didn't do it. Here, catch it. You can catch an ancient Egyptian incense smell coming in that you're like, oh my God, that's amazing, but I don't even know what that is.
All right.
You're getting that? The incense?
Yeah.
She might have been Nefertiti in Egypt, bringing compassion to people. What would you describe? You don't have to share the answer, but roughly, what did you just have transact, just so people know you transacted?
Yeah, well, I'll share. I'm one of these people who's like, okay, what should I do next? What's the next thing that I should do? And I think that's actually, you can get answers from your spirit guides about that. But the main message I've been getting from all these cards I've been putting up is just allow things to unfold.
And what's next? If you're only going to ask one question, that's the $1 million question, because you can't go wrong. There's only the next thing you can do. And those are actual energy photos, daytime, nighttime, indoors, outdoors. I'd hand the camera to folks, but people could just see, and I have that happen. I had a panel with Britt Elders, CEO of Shirley MacLaine, the actress, but she's also a filmmaker, author, along with Lisa Richmond, healer out of Canada, who's totally talented, wide open, and Dr. Christian Strang out of Colorado, who's amazing. Sorry, Northwest US. The three of them, I believe, got to see a Pleiadian Arcturian during the mind-body panel thing. We did it certainly before the show. I just lean over. You get a direct joint experience. I'm off the hook. I got one final little experiential thing for you. Then you're closing us out because you're a professional show host and you know how to close out shows. So I'm going to buy you time with this. It's not just a piece of foam with black paper around it. The blue sky, by the way, works better. I'll show my energy to you and the audience. I've done this on other shows. It's just the aura light thing, the force from Star Wars. I'll do Yoda's voice. I'm buying you all the time, Rod, to give us one final closeout for humanity, growth, consciousness. You know, it's all expanding. It never stops unless you do a little something called thinking. But blue sky is number one for a background. This is number two. I'm going to do the Celestine prophecy thing, but as one of my guests said, who was alive in the 70s and her 20s, they were already doing it this way before the movie ever existed. And I'll add, in India, they do it this way. So there's no one way about it. I just want an excuse to tell you a joke. You may have already heard it, the Starbucks one, but you can still laugh again. If it's truly funny, we're going to know, because I did tell it to you just before the show. You're going to hear this joke twice in a period of an hour and a half. Here it is. You don't have to show me yours, but I get to show you mine. It's going to be white, gold, green, blue, rainbow colors, one color. If there's any gray in there, it's a little bit of thinking, judging. breathe more, drop to your heart. Whatever's 1% of 1% of extra letting go. It's like a blanket over the real color. It'll turn fuchsia, whatever color that is. But here, I get to tell a joke. If people are laughing or breathing or smiling or do a chubby checker or Elvis, you can meet Elvis, you're letting go. And that's all this is, be in your heart. Okay, just all you have to do is tell us what you're seeing. And if you want to go for broke, ask an angel to do a heart off of it, extra fireworks, flares, something that you know can't be my energy. We're going to blame angels for this. If you get any extra, not Canada. Don't blame Canada. Okay, here comes the dad joke. Santa's reindeer, Blitzen and Dancer, just those two. Why do they drink so much coffee, Blitzen and Dancer? Breathe through your mouth and see with your heart. Your heart already knows what to do. No try. Blitzen and Dancer, Santa's reindeer, why do they drink so much coffee? Because they're Santa's Starbucks. Do not. There is no try. And there's my Yoda imitation. He's laughing, which means he's letting go. Do you see a little filament of light between my fingers, a wisp?
I don't, but I see something else.
What do you see?
There's an angel in the the wings and everything behind your fingers.
So you just did the first time ever. This is perfect because you're totally like force sensitive Jedi level. And you're doing the self-discovery thing through your show hosting, and I love it. And what you just did beautifully bypassed what could have been better for unfolding than the way you just handled that. Yeah, you didn't. I love it. There's no better answer than that. And you've had all the time now. I've stalled. I've told a dad joke. I've shown energy, and I'll do it a different way. This is another 10, 20 seconds for you to give us a good closing speech, not just any old speech, Rod. Okay, there's a regular Bic lighter. You know, I've got a gray one, but let me pick a more colorful one. Bright blue is a little more fun. Okay, what color do you see in the flame? Is it white, gold, orange, blue down below? What's the normal flame that you're seeing in the Bic lighter? Any color?
The white yellow color.
Prima. Now ask for extra and ask angels to make it really good. And if you don't mind, put your hand on your heart for a second, set your intent. You're letting go like a champion. That's good enough. And then here's my finger like a Bic lighter. See if you can catch a little light coming off of it like it's a lighter. I'll go on an old bodyboarding trip in Florida. Hold on. My finger feels hot and warm. I believe there's light coming out of it like a lighter. What are you seeing off my fingertip? Anything?
A spark. A spark at the top.
And I didn't do it. We're blaming angels. Don't blame Canada. Rod, you get the last closeout here. What are you going to leave us with?
Well, I'll leave it with a request for people. And my request is to, if you've never spoken to a psychic, if you've never spoken to a medium, you've never spoken to someone like Michael, who talks about these things that are outside of usual science, even if it's a fortune teller, someone who reads cards or crystal balls, have the courage to actually book an appointment, or the next time you're going, there's a fair and there's people always at these fairs, go and actually talk to them and see what happens. That's my request for people. Just be open-minded about what might actually occur. It doesn't matter if they're real, if they're actually a charlatan or not. Just go and see and keep an open mind and see what happens.
Rod Bland, Sydney, Australia. Incredible interview. I felt it. I hope you enjoyed being on. I hope the audience liked it. If you guys could put some comments in. Emojis work if you're going to be shy. It's okay, but 5 emojis, I can do it. 5 emojis or more counts extra in the algorithm. I'm starting the rumor now. Rod, you've been a champ. Thank you for being on Angels, Positivity, and Love.
It's been my pleasure, Michael, and heaps of fun. Thanks for having me on.